Hello crafters, this is Yana Smakula for SimonsSTM.com. Welcome back for another Yippee For Yana episode. In today's video, I'm creating a floral card featuring Simon's delicate outline flowers cling background stamp. I will show you a simple way to color with Copic markers and stretch your colors, and also combine Copic coloring with a heat embossed outline. So here's a look at this gorgeous background stamp. It is a large stamp, so I need to use my Misty stamping tool to be able to fit the stamp inside. I prefer to use a stamping tool when using background stamps like this, as that's pretty much the only way I can get a very good impression on my paper. I'm using Simon's 120-pound cardstock for my stamping and coloring today. I love how Copic markers blend on this paper. The paper has a special coating, and I feel it helps the Copic markers blend better. Hence, why I picked this paper for my project. I've treated the paper with anti-static powder as I plan to heat emboss the image outline here, and I inked up the stamp with clear embossing ink. I'm using the ink from Nuvo from Tonic Studios, although I typically reach for Simon's Stamp embossing ink or Hero Arts embossing ink. Right now, I'm in the process of remodeling my craft room, and I can't find half of my supplies and all of that mess, so I'm using whatever I can find. And by the way, this embossing ink is pretty good. The ink pad here is just a little smaller compared to the ink pad from Simon or Hero Arts, so this is not usually my first choice for stamping large background stamps like this, but it is a good embossing ink for stamping smaller images like sentiments or some individual images. I've stamped the image onto the paper, and I'm covering it with Simon's Stamp Antique Gold Embossing Powder. This is my favorite color by far, and I love to use this color when I'm heat embossing florals. Now, the next step is to heat set the powder, and once that is done, we can begin our coloring. Now, embossing powder and Copic markers, or any alcohol markers, don't really mix well together. You can damage the tip of your marker when you color over an embossed outline, so you do have to be very careful. Now, I've done this quite a few times already, and I really love the look of Copic coloring combined with heat embossed outline, so I am willing to take the risk. But like I said, do be careful. Do not overblend next to the heat embossed line. I've picked just a handful of Copic markers for my coloring. I'm not one to use a lot of colors. I typically go with just 3 or 4 shades. And here I'm using RV00, my lightest pink. This color will coat all of the flower petals to give them a very pale pink tint. I also have RV10, this is my medium pink, and also one that I will use to mix with the RV09 marker to really blend these two colors together. And of course, the RV09 marker, which is my darkest pink, and I will use this to add deep shading to these florals. I start by wiping the paper with a cloth to remove any residual anti-static powder I might have left on the paper. If you don't do this, you end up picking up that powder with the tip of your Copic marker, and that's not good. So make sure you wipe the paper with a dry cloth. I've started by applying the lightest color, RV00. I'm coloring one petal at a time. Next, I applied my medium color, RV10, and I flicked it coming in from the base of the petal. Next, I applied RV09 color, and again, I flicked it coming in from the base of the petal, but not as far as I did with the previous color. You can see how big of a color difference these two colors have. The RV09 is much, much darker, and to create a gradual transition between the two colors, the RV09 and RV10, I'm going to use my RV10 and kiss it to the RV09 to temporarily create a different color in my marker. Darker than RV10, but lighter than RV09. You can see I'm touching the tips of the two markers. The RV10 marker picks up some of the RV09 color, and now when I color, I have a slightly darker color coming out of the marker, helping me blend these two colors together. You can do this with all of your Copic markers or all of your alcohol markers. Simply touch the marker tips to have one color transfer into the other marker to create a new shade or even a new color. Touch just for a second or two to have very little color transfer, or touch for a few seconds, maybe 5 or even 10, to have a lot of the color transfer into the other marker. If you've ever used the chameleon markers, this is the same concept. You kiss 2 shades or 2 colors to create a third shade or a third color. I go back to add more color to my markers and color the flower petals. Once you're done coloring, you can scribble the marker onto a scrap piece of paper to get any residual ink off, and your marker will go back to its original color, so you're not damaging your marker at all. Also, I wanted to point out that it is best to hold the marker you're transferring the color from above the marker you're transferring the color to. The gravity will help to pull the color down onto the marker you wish to transfer the color to. Before I continue to color this panel, I decided I needed to trim it down, and I cut it to 3 3/4 inches by 5 inches. I did that so that I didn't have to do any unnecessary coloring on the paper. Next, I colored the leaves. Now here, I didn't use the same trick. Instead, I just picked 4 shades of green: YG67, the darkest green; YG17, medium green; YG03, another medium green; and YG01, the lightest green. I wanted to add very deep, dark shadows to the leaves, so I used the YG67 marker a lot to achieve that look. I colored the rest of the images using the same techniques and colors, and now I'm coloring the flower centers using cool gray markers. I used C9, C7, and C5 here. These flowers look a little bit like anemones to me, and anemones have black centers, so that's why I used black or dark gray colors for the flower centers. I wanted to back this panel with a light gray cardstock, so here I used Simon Says stamp Fog. I trimmed it to 4 1/4 by 5.5 inches and adhered that panel onto the front of an A2 white top folding card base. I also foam mounted my colored panel on top. From here, you can take your card anywhere you like in terms of theme or sentiment. I foiled a sentiment for my card, and the sentiment reads, "Where the flowers bloom, so does hope." This card has lots of florals, so I felt this sentiment was appropriate. I used a glimmer plate from my blooming floral background set from Spellbinders and foiled it in gold foil on Spellbinders specialty glimmer cardstock. I love how well this cardstock foils. This glimmer plate also has a coordinating die, and I used the die to cut the foiled sentiment out, and I also cut 4 additional blank layers from some scrap paper. The blank layers will help to add dimension to my card. I used Barely Arts glue and adhered the layers together and also onto the card. You can use foam adhesive squares instead of die cutting cardstock layers, or just cut one piece from fun foam and use that to add dimension to your sentiment. I also used gems from Spellbinders to add some sparkle to my project. I used some from the crystal mix and also some from the gold mix. And that finished my card. So here's a look at this card made with a Simon Says stamp, delicate outline flowers cling background stamp. I hope this video has given you some ideas on how you can use this stamp, and I hope you feel inspired to create. Thanks so much for joining me today. Love you guys, and I'll see you next time.